Bro, No Way Home dropped, Cobra Kai is coming out, the main channel is being revived. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Tyler, and today I am bringing you guys another MCU what if scenario, and this scenario today is This scenario is talking about what if Andrew Garfield was in the MCU, and this video is featuring my boy Damon. Go subscribe to him. He does MCU what ifs and Dragon Ball stuff. Go check him out, show him some love, and with that out of the way, let's keep this intro short and sweet, and let's just get right into the scenario. For starters, Phase 1 for the most part is the same with the exception of TASM 1 being the first movie to introduce a hero and not Iron Man. I just feel like this makes sense, especially with the whole giant laser in the sky and Lizard wanting to turn people into lizards, which was weird. And it doesn't really make any sense for none of the Avengers or none of these heroes to intervene, especially with something this big happening. So we'll just say, for the sake of simplicity, TASM 1 is the first MCU movie. Though after the events of TASM 1, Nick Fury would keep tabs on him that would eventually lead into him confronting the Webhead when he's facing some fodder street crime. Nick Fury would tell him about the Avengers initiative, but Peter would deny, saying that he started all of this over some petty revenge. His job isn't to just look good and protect the city from world-ending threats. He's protecting everyone. The reason he puts on the mask is because of his mistakes that night, that one terrible night that changed Peter's life forever. And he doesn't think it makes sense for him to team up with other superheroes, which Nick Fury would respect. However, he would keep on insisting him to join because it's not what he thinks it is. But Peter would just ignore Nick Fury, going about his day, and swings along. After the rest of Phase 1 begins to align with itself, the events of Avengers 1 would take place. Hawkeye gets hypnotized, and Cap and the others are being recruited, and for the most part, the movie takes place the same. However, when the Chitauri and Loki arrive to attack New York, you already know Spider-Man would have been out here protecting the civilians and slapping cannon fodder. Cool interactions I can see happening is Spider-Man just completely fanboying over Tony Stark, along with working alongside with people like Cap and Hawkeye, who he would respect. I think him and Cap's interaction would be similar to that of Peter and Cap's in Civil War, but obviously with not them fighting each other, but with them fighting alongside each other. He thought this would have sucked, but working with people who are just like him is actually pretty exciting. And they are willing to protect the people just as much as him. The Avengers get in their iconic circle stance and would go on to defeat Loki and the Chitauri. Phase 1 ends with the crew going out for a good old pizza slice, with Andrew taking a pie of his own before departing off, saying it was a pleasure fighting alongside the greats. Tony and the others insist on him eating with them, but he's not an Avenger just yet. He still has a long way to go before becoming that. He would go on to swing away with the box of pizza before the credits would then roll. Now for Phase 2, we obviously are going to have The Amazing Spider-Man 2 take place. However, it's going to be way different because I'm going to try my best to make this an actually decent movie. Now for starters, Oscorp and Stark Industries being around is weird, and Harry ruins the majority of TASM 2 anyway, so we'll say for the sake of simplicity, Oscorp isn't a thing, and neither is Harry being Peter's homie. I mean, this relationship is not even brought up until the second movie anyway, so I think we should just disregard it completely. For this next film, we are going to slightly tweak it so not only is it tolerable, but we also have a better Peter Parker overall going into big events like Civil War and the rest of the Infinity Saga. We are keeping Electro, but besides that, we are basically erasing the majority of this movie, aka the dumb shit in it. Oh yeah, and Peter is getting a new costume, however, that new drip isn't acquired just yet. We'd start our movie off similarly to the beginning, but Peter isn't getting people killed along with being so cocky. After the fight with the Avengers happened, Peter was on his toes more than ever, trying to do whatever it takes to be the Guardian that people desperately need right now. So Gwen and Peter should not be breaking up and getting back together constantly, rather just have them work through their troubles and Peter just going through that whole Captain Stacy death. That way we can allow Andrew and Emma to do their thing. Electro still gets saved by Peter, leading into him being obsessed and falling into a pit of eels, though since he's in the MCU the energy is different, and obviously he's not working at Oscorp but rather he's working at Stark Industries. That also applies to Lizard, mind you. But yeah, since the energy is different in the MCU, as stated in No Way Home by Electro himself, this Electro would resemble more of his spectacular Spider-Man self, which means he isn't fucking blue and ugly. Electro would escape the building and he would then see himself off of the windows. He would see how much of a monster he's become, and trying to get some help, he would try and run to a local police station. However, this leads into policemen just being terrified and automatically shooting at him, since Electro is a man made of lightning. He would put his hands up saying that he is innocent, but then lightning would then blast from his palms, electrocuting multiple officers, and this would lead into one officer trying to be the bigger man and trying to stop Electro himself, but this would lead into Electro trying to blast at him. Electro would say, "Get away from me," as the lightning seemingly is about to kill the policeman, but luckily Spider-Man comes in clutch and moves him out of the way with his webs. Peter would then question why this man is trying to attack policemen, but Electro would say how he wasn't trying to do that at all, he was just looking for some help, that's all he wanted. Spider-Man would then say, "Then why did you just try and attack a police officer?" And now Electro is just building up all this frustration, which Spider-Man can tell, and he would try to tell Max to calm down, but Electro would just say screw it, no one's gonna believe him anyway, as he would then blast at Spider-Man, catching him off guard and sending him through the police station. A fight then ensues between the two, and we would have Electro shooting multiple blasts of lightning, with Spider-Man evading all these blasts pretty easily. However, when he tries to come into contact with Electro or even try to punch him, he simply can't due to his suit not being able to handle the electricity. And as Peter lands a bunch of blows on Electro, his suit would slowly crumple, leading into his skin coming into contact with the lightning, which is no bueno. And now with Spider-Man staggered, Electro has an opening shot just for him to almost kill Spider-Man, but luckily Electro sent him flying far enough for Peter to escape, and Electro assumed that Spider-Man is dead. And now with that out of the way, Electro is now going to try and look for some professional help by going to a hospital. However, the more Electro tries to get help, the more the city paints him as a menace. And now everyone is wondering where Spider-Man is at, questioning if Electro actually killed him. Peter would barely manage to get home, with him having no access to web shooters due to them being completely fried. As Peter just arrives to his house and is about to open the door, May would open it for him, indicating that she's been waiting for him the whole time. And May would then be revealed that her nephew is none other than Spider-Man. We cut to the next scene with May helping Peter clean his wounds, but May would be going off on him. All of what's going on with May, working constantly and barely getting by, let alone now having to get Peter money for college, on top of now having to worry about Peter and if he's going to die every night out there. She's already lost Ben, she can't lose Peter too. And this is when she strictly tries to prohibit Peter from being Spider-Man, and awkwardly Gwen would then arrive, making sure Peter is okay, and May would be even more pissed at Gwen for not even saying anything to her. She won't allow Peter to keep doing this, and she forbids Gwen from seeing him. And now this monster made of lightning did this to his suit. How could he even expect to win? She's not gonna let Peter try and get himself killed, and that's when Peter cuts her off and snaps. He doesn't know how he's going to win. All he knows is that he needs to recover and go out and try again, because ever since the night of Ben's death, Peter has been living with that constant fear of not being enough to save another person, because he was the reason why Uncle Ben died that night. Initially, he was filled with rage and just wanted to try and track down the man who killed Ben, but all that became pointless when people needed his help. When the city was in bad shape, there was only one man who could step up, and that was him. He's been doing this before the Avengers. He's not going to let them try and pick up on his slack, because they won't. They're out here saving the city from world-ending threats. No one's gonna care about a bank robber, or a purse being stolen by an old lady, or some random person that no one knows the name of being murdered. That's Peter's job. Peter is the one to make sure the little guys are safe, and make sure the same thing that happened to him doesn't happen to other people. Peter would then look at his destroyed web shooters and would begin to circle some ideas in his head, and he tells Gwen and May that he will figure everything out. He promises that. Now, while that's going on, I think we could have some scenes of New York and basically what is going on with Spider-Man Gone. We are introduced to none other than J. Jonah himself, who's played by J.K. Simmons, and he's currently trying to get a hold of Peter to get some pictures. He would also be trying to paint Electro as a hero, but the Bugle gets a lot of backlash, with Electro attacking authorities, attacking local hospitals. One thing that's happened to him that's actually kind of decent is the fact that he turned into this monster. But now everyone's basically trying to mask him as a villain and just running away from him. Well, now they'll have to listen. Everyone chose to ignore Max, but now Max is no longer Max. He will now go by Electro. And Electro would see how the Bugle was painting him as a hero initially, but now is painting him as a villain. He would go on to go to the Bugle personally to tell J. Jonah that he's neither a hero or a villain. All he wants is just to be listened to, but clearly no one is even willing to take their time to try and hear him out. So now he wants to make them pay, starting with J. Jonah by trying to mask him as a villain. However, he will forgive him if he tells him about where Peter Parker is, as Max overheard J. Jonah complaining about how Peter Parker hasn't sent him pictures of Spider-Man, meaning Peter knows where Spider-Man is, so that way Electro can actually have a way to talk to Spider-Man, to show him that he's wrong and indeed he can't be helped. However, Spidey comes in to save J. Jonah directly. Luckily Spidey comes in to save J. Jonah directly, and the final battle takes place at the top of the Daily Bugle. Electro would shoot Spidey through the floors above and through the roof, but Peter recovers easily. Electro rises up, saying to Spider-Man that he's done trying, and that anytime he tries to talk to someone, and even before he became this monster, everyone chose to ignore him. But now with this power, he actually has the ability to make a purpose. But now with these powers, he has the ability to change that But now with these powers, he has the ability to change that and truly find himself a better purpose. However, this power that Electro is using, he's not using it responsibly. Spidey at first thought he was just attacking the cops just because he was an alien. Spider-Man thought initially that Electro was a villain, and for that he apologizes. If he doesn't stop now, his reputation will grow worse and worse, and Electro would say, but that's the point. He can't go any lower than he's already at. But Spidey says that doesn't mean he can try and play God with these powers. And it looks like that Spidey is almost reaching to max almost, but then that is when cops would come in, trying to murder Electro, but the bullets just vaporize when they come into contact with them. At this point, Electro would then shoot a lightning bolt at the helicopter, leading into the civilians, almost turning into mashed potatoes before Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man comes in and saves them. He would shoot out multiple webs to try and lift the helicopter so that it doesn't hit the ground, and similarly to that of the PS4 Spider-Man game, Andrew manages to save the day. After this, Electro would try to lunge himself at Spidey, but that's when we see the webs conducting the lightning off of his body, allowing Peter to launch him into the side of a building and completely immobilize him. Peter made it so that his webs can actually conduct electricity, hence why he built himself a new suit. Electro this time isn't going to blow up, but rather he's taken in for legitimate help. And as you notice, Gwen Stacy does not die, and I feel like we need that relationship to overall just grow before we even get to that point, so just have these two around for now. With the movie ending with May apologizing to Peter and forgiving him for Ben's death and going out as Spider-Man and constantly lying to her. But now, all of that stops. And with that, Peter would then hug his Aunt May before then grabbing Gwen and swinging off around New York. Andrew gets his final swing with TASM 2 ending as a good movie.
The rest of Phase 2 takes place the same, since Peter would still be in New York fighting the good fight, while the events of Ultron happened the same. And now we can finally get into Civil War, which I think after Andrew hears about what Tony is fighting for, and not easily being manipulated as he's not a child, Peter would mainly want to keep his identity intact, and honestly, he believes he shouldn't even be involved in this, as he's not even an Avenger, but now he's suddenly dragged into this. This leads into Andrew disagreeing with Tony and instead would join up with Captain America, who would try to look for him as he looked at him to be pretty useful in the Battle of New York. And so, Peter joins alongside Cap, which would change things drastically for the team. Having Peter there means Falcon and Bucky are around for a lot of the fight. Black Panther probably just flat out loses thanks to Peter's taser webs, which we know could incapacitate him as shown with Black Widow. And there's the fact that Iron Man is going to get jumped by even more of Cap's team, leading into the Avengers officially disbanding and Zemo not being captured. He, unironically, wins in the end. So for the Infinity Saga, well, I don't think Peter would get the Iron Spider, since he and Tony do not have that relationship. Plus, Vulture wouldn't even be a thing, and if he was, I'd just have Tony handle that, since Andrew and Adrian are just too different to really be in a movie together. And I think, low-key, Andrew would just be fighting some Outriders with Cap, and really not adding too much, since this Spidey is a lot more independent. And this also means that the other movies for Spidey in the MCU wouldn't occur, and his story, so far, would conclude. However, I do think whenever Phase 4 ends, we could have the death of Gwen Stacy occur, since she and Peter come back from the snap. And that's all for me today over on Tyler's channel. I want to thank you so much for having me once again, man, and if you guys want to see more from me, then make sure to subscribe to my channel, Damon What If. Thank you so much for having me on again, Tyler.